Hi, this is Walcott Fine Art, and I'm Jason Walcott. One of my favorite mediums to work in is pastel. So in this first of a series of video on pastel, I thought we'd take a look at the difference between the dry kind, known as soft pastel, and oil pastels, and why they're actually two completely different mediums. So, let's go take a look. Hello everyone. Today we are going to be taking a look at the difference between traditional soft pastels, which are the dry kind, and oil pastels. And the reason that I want to cover this is there seems to be some confusion. Like a question that pastel artists will get a lot of is, they'll say, are these oil pastels or these dry pastels? And they're actually two completely different mediums. They're not the same. And the confusion, of course, comes from the fact that they both contain the word pastel in the name. But I'm going to show you the difference and talk a little bit about what they are and how they work. Now, traditional soft pastels, or just pastels, those are the dry kind. And they typically come in sets like this that you buy when you first, buy a set. And then you can replace the sticks individually as they get used up. Now this is a set of pastels made by this company called Sennelier. And they make very good high-end pastels. And they come in sets like this. And now what pastels are is they're not chalks. Chalk, like the kind that you use in school, is basically it's calcium carbonate mixed with dye. And that's not what pastels are. Chalks are inexpensive. They're not made to be permanent. They're not an artist medium. Pastels, on the other hand, what these are essentially is they're the exact same pigments that you use to make oil paint, watercolors, acrylics, exact same pigments. The only difference is instead of grinding them into oil or gum arabic to make a paint out of them, you mix just enough of a binder in them to make them stick together, and then you let them dry so they form a stick. And so basically that's what these are. They're pure artist's pigments in stick form. So the thing about pastels that makes them great is because of that, because there's no liquid vehicle that's around them, they actually tend to be more permanent. Because like when oil paintings age, and they start to crack and, get old and turn yellow, like if you see some paintings that are hundreds of years old, the ones in the museums that need to be cleaned, the reason that happens is because of the linseed oil layer. It's not the pigments that's doing that. So pastels, as long as they're framed under glass and cared for, they're actually one of the most permanent mediums. And the other advantage to using pastels is, unlike paint, acrylic or any kind of paint, if you need to stop in the middle of what you're doing and walk away, you can come back days, weeks, even months later, pick up right where you left off. There's nothing that's going to dry on you. There's nothing that's going to get stuck in your brush. And so those are a lot of the advantages. And it has kind of an immediacy to it that you don't quite get the same thing with oil painting. So I like to work in both mediums, pastels and oils. Now, the thing with pastels is they come in different hardnesses. So typically the less expensive ones, and just like oil paints, there are student grade pastels and professional grade pastels. But also you can get professional grade pastels that are still in ranges of hardness. So I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about. So this is a pastel made by a company called Cretacolor. And Cretacolor, they make these sticks, little square stick pastels. Now these are very hard pastels. Now Cretacolor is a great professional brand. It's not student grade. It's definitely artist grade. But they just put more binder in it so that when it dries into the stick, it's harder and less pigment comes off. So I'll show you an example. So just giving it a moderate pressure with this hard pastel stick, you can see that, the pigment is coming off the stick, but you're getting a lot of, like, you can still see the texture of the paper through there. And, blending it doesn't blend all that much. Now this is a Rembrandt pastel, which is kind of in the middle. It's a hard / medium soft pastel. So it's softer than the hard ones like this. But it's not as soft as the really soft brands. So this one, if I do the same thing, you can see that more pigment is coming off. But you're still getting some texture. And these are blending more easily than the harder one. Now this is a brand called Rembrandt. And these are very, very, very popular. A lot of people start with Rembrandt. A lot of people like them. I know some professional artists who swear by Rembrandt as part of their pastel palette. I find, for me personally, I don't really care for them all that much. But Rembrandt's a good sort of starter pastel if you want to kind of get your feet wet and you've never used it before, because the texture's right in the middle. Now this is the softest of the soft. So these are like the really high-end, high-grade soft pastels. This is a Terry Ludwig. And you can see just from me holding the stick, it's coming off on my fingers. And if I do that with the same pressure, you can see that it's almost immediately getting really like complete coverage of the paper because it's so soft. And of course it blends much more readily than the harder ones. And this paper too is kind of preventing the blending a little bit because it's made for pastels. Anyway, so those are your different degrees of hardnesses, and a lot of times what pastel artists will do is they'll start with the harder ones to do their underlayers, and then they'll gradually move to the softest ones at the top. So that is what soft pastels, or just pastels, are. They're pure. You're painting with pure pigment in stick form. And it is definitely a professional grade medium. A lot of professional artists use soft pastels. Now to move on to oil pastels, these are a little bit different. And the reason they're different is oil pastels are pigments, of course, but they're mixed with mineral oil and wax. So they're not dry, they're waxy. Like like the Crayola crayons that you used to use in school when you were a kid. And you can see they have more of that waxy crayon texture. But the thing with oil pastels is, now this is a pretty good brand, these Wongyos. These are nice. There's only one high-end professional grade of oil pastel that I know of, and that's Sennelier, the same company that made the regular pastels I showed you earlier. Now these Sennelier oil pastels, these are almost like painting with lipstick. They're so soft and creamy. And they produce less of the, like you'll notice sometimes with oil pastels, when you start to get a heavy application on there, like this, you'll get those I don't know if you can see this in the camera. You see these little, like, these little thingamabobs that, like, these little pieces of wax that get up on the surface, and those that'll drive you insane because they're hard to get rid of. You can sort of mash them down, but oil pastels tend to do that because it's the wax building up on the surface of the paper that makes those little jizzlies that come off and and end up on the surface of your painting. So, like I said, other than these Sennelier, which are really soft and professional grade, I don't know of any professional grade oil pastel sets. And one of the drawbacks to oil pastels is because they're made with mineral oil and wax in them, they never dry. So they're not a medium like oil paint that dries. Just to make a quick clarification, sometimes you might see a product on the market called oil sticks or oil bars. Those are not the same thing as oil pastels. Oil sticks / oil bars, those are actually oil paint with linseed oil in stick form. Winsor Newton makes them. I think another couple of companies might make them as well. I know Winsor Newton makes them for sure. Those can be used on canvas just like regular oil paint, and they will actually dry just like regular oil paint. Oil pastels like these kind will never dry, so the surface will always remain waxy, and they're really more of a sketching medium. They're not really meant to be used for professional, quality end works. It's not really a medium that's made for professional finished pieces that you're going to sell or put in a gallery. And the reason is, and I'll show you with another example. A reason is a lot of times what happens with these oil pastels is because they're made with wax, they get a bloom on them. And here's a perfect example. Can you see that like waxy stuff that's migrated to the surface? Now these are Mimary oil pastels, and Mimary is a good, they're a professional company. And you see when I rub it with my fingers, that waxy bloom comes off. And that's because the wax that's in this migrates to the surface. And your painting is going to do that if you make a painting with these. So, and it tends to be worse on the dark colors. Like here's a dark purple, and you can see that waxy bloom that it gets on it. So if you were to make a painting, with that color, and you had a big area of that color, a couple years from now, that's going to have that bloom on it. And you can't varnish it because they don't dry, and you can't really do anything. Like once that happened to your painting, there'd be nothing really that you could do. So oil pastels are really meant for more of a sketching medium. They're meant to do studies in preparation for an oil painting. They're a great medium probably for kids to get started. They would be a great medium for beginning artists to kind of get their feet wet with colors and blending. But again, I would not recommend them for finished works of art. Except maybe unless you went with the Sennelier, because these are actually made a little bit differently from these kinds, so these have less of a tendency. You probably could use the Sennelier brand for a finished work of art, but these are very expensive. Way, way more expensive than these guys. Or these. Or sometimes the other popular brand of oil pastels is Sakura Craypas. I would not use those for a finished artwork. They're just not a permanent medium. So, whereas dry pastel, soft pastels definitely are. So, I hope that cleared up some things for you, gave you some examples of how the differences between soft pastel and oil pastel, and where and when you might want to use them. And I look forward to the next installment of exploring pastels. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Thanks so much for watching. Go ahead and click on that subscribe button so you won't miss the next video. And why not spread the joy? Be sure to share my videos on your favorite social media. Don't forget to head on over to my website, walcottfineart.com, where you can see my art, read my blog, or when you join my newsletter list, you can win free art. Every month, I'll choose a lucky winner for my email list, and that person will receive a mini original oil painting. There's a chance to win every month, so be sure to sign up today so you don't miss out. Plus, you'll get my fun newsletter. See you next time!